So we're back with another 15-minute video where, again, Stefan started the timer, and you know the rules. If we don't beat the timer, we suck.
Longest 15 minutes in college football videos.
Figure it out, man. Ohio State's 7-0, 4-0 in Big Ten play. Ryan Day gets his 5th shutout. They are, without a question, the number 1 team in the country. Whether they have the best resume or not, this is the most complete team in college football. Let's start here. What if you had one word to describe what the first 7 weeks of the season have been like for Ohio State, Stefan? What would it be?
Experiment, and in the best way possible, right? I think Ohio State has allowed itself a runway to figuring out what it's best at, right? And I don't mean – because I think we know offensively what this team is best at, and it's Julian Sayin throwing to Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. But Ryan Day has talked about the run game, not just in a sense of like they need to run the ball better. He's talked about it of needing to figure out what they're best at in the run game, right? Like we see, you love talking about pistol stretch to the boundary, right?
So much.
They did it a lot. It felt like they did it a lot today, and it actually worked a couple times. But like trying to figure out in the run game what they're best at, counter, inside, like different things, right? What are they best at in the running game, right? And how you get that running game going. You know, putting more on Julian Sayin's plate. How does he handle that as it goes on? On defense, as good as this defense has been, they have worked on things, right? Like Lorenzo Styles was available. I think it was kind of like they knew what this game was going to look like and they didn't want to risk making it worse, so Lorenzo didn't play. But you got to see Jermaine work a little bit in the nickel. You got to see Tywan Malone work its way up the depth chart, right? Like Ohio State, because of how good it is, how well coached, how elite the roster is, the talent, all that, they knew they could get to 7-0. I didn't think it was. They didn't think it was going to be this easy, right? Because you get past the Texas game, and then Washington maybe wasn't exactly what we thought they were going to be in their first road test. Illinois maybe wasn't as good as we thought going into the season that they were going to be. This Wisconsin, I think coming into the year, we looked at this Wisconsin game as maybe a trap because it's between Illinois and a bye week in Penn State, and this Wisconsin team just is not good, especially offensively. They can't do anything, right? So Ohio State, somewhat unintentionally, has had this runway to figuring out everything it needs to figure out. And I think when Ryan Day and his staff go through the stuff, through the film, not just from this game, but kind of through the whole first part of this season, when they go through the film, I think they're going to look at a lot of things and say, that wasn't good enough, that wasn't good enough, that wasn't good enough. But they're going to look at some other things and say, okay, we're actually really good at that. Maybe better than we thought we were going to be. Okay, this is working for us. Let's try some more against Penn State and UCLA and Purdue and Rutgers, right? Like this team can kind of analyze everything and really kind of come out of the bye week with what it knows it's his best game plan, right? And now you've allowed yourself where maybe if you see that there are things to work on, you can do that against Penn State, UCLA, Purdue, Rutgers, right? Like you can work on some things in those games, which you have at least put yourself in a spot where if they were playing Indiana or Oregon or Georgia or Alabama next week, I think that they would kind of be able to say, okay, this is probably our best game plan going into that game. So it hasn't always been the easiest watch, and it hasn't always been the most fun, right? They've kind of been boring good throughout these first 7 games. But I think they walk out of it saying, okay, here's the full menu of food options that we've had. Okay, now we're going to make a nice restaurant that has our 10 best options. What is our fastball? What is our best thing, right? And I think they probably have a good idea of that. They can still work on it. It's going to get better and cleaned up, I think, more by the time you get to Michigan in the playoff and the Big Ten championship game. But I think you're at least at a good spot because of the way you've been able to experiment. We've been harsh on them after some games. It hasn't always looked pretty. But I think we've always been understanding of what the goal is. And I think this Wisconsin game was a good reminder of, like, this is kind of what it's been building toward. And they're in a really good spot. They're outside of them in Indiana, nobody's in a better spot in the country going into November. Not just in terms of resume, but in terms of what those teams look like, right? Like Indiana's looked pretty good. Ohio State's looked pretty good. There's other undefeated teams. They're like a Georgia Tech is undefeated, but you're looking at them being like, they got a lot they still need to work on, right? There's other, even, Oregon, you got one-loss teams that have looked really good, but it's clear that they've still got some things to work on. Ohio State's in a spot where they're undefeated. They have a decent enough resume. Maybe it's not the best because they don't have a win like the win at Oregon, but they have a decent enough resume with wins against Illinois, Washington, and Texas that you look at them and you say, you've got the resume, you've got the talent, and now things are starting to click. No one you'd rather be, right? Best part about being 7-0 is that you can win a national championship at the end of it.
Pick a word, Gillis.
Building. Stefan kind of talked about it a little bit, but I think we need to start looking at that Texas game as a little bit more important to what Ohio State has accomplished in these last couple of weeks, because Texas was number one coming into Columbus. They were the number one team in the country. There was all the buildup about Arch Manning. There was all the buildup about all the talent they have on that defense. I mean, they portaled so hard on that defensive line, and it was, man, Colin Simmons, and I think Ethan Burke is coming here. Like, those guys are really good, and they're going to present some problems. And it was this huge thing where we built it up, rightfully so, and everybody else built it up. And Ryan Day said, we just got to get through this game. That was our game plan. We had to get through that game. And because they won it, it kind of bought them some time, because it allowed you the ability. Grambling was whatever, but Ohio, it showed some warts. Hey, we got to work on our red zone stuff against, or after the game against Ohio. And then you had a game at Washington, and we saw them play a little bit slower and a little bit more methodical, and they didn't really open it up there. Then they then they come home to Minnesota, and it was okay. Well, they kind of let it fly here, but it wasn't the full arsenal of this offense, right? And Illinois, same thing. Today they let it fly, and now they're 7-0, and you go, okay, today is what this offense would have been. I'm curious what this team looks like if they're 0-1. I'm curious what this team does differently if they're 0-1. And things have broken, as Stefan was kind of laying out, in the right way for this team, I think, to where he said it. Like, Washington, I mean, Damon Williams played another, like, they scored 6 points against Ohio State. They scored 7 against Michigan. Like, that offense has struggled against decent defenses, right? So that, I mean, Illinois is probably not as good as we thought they were going to be. Wisconsin, we mentioned the trap game potential early, and I mean, this is a mess. Like, this program is not. Yeah, this program's not in a good place. Even Penn State in 2 weeks, maybe that game could have some tricky qualities, but like, there's not a ton of like runway on the schedule to where you look at and go, that's a really good team that Ohio State's played. It's not their fault, but I think that broke the right way for Ohio State to kind of look at it and say, we don't have a loss. We can kind of build as we go. Because I think if you lose that game, you kind of have to build the plane as you're flying it. Because you can't go into that Washington game and go, let's take our time. Let's develop the offense. Let's figure out what we can do. And Ryan Day talked about that, kind of figuring out what they could and couldn't do. And he's mentioned that now, I think, once or twice. So this was something that Ohio State has been building towards in these last couple of weeks. And because they beat Texas, because they started 1-0, you basically had a month after that to kind of figure some things out. You go on the road to Washington. Look, they were, 8.5-point favorites in that game. A tough environment. It was a loud environment. Tough game for Ohio State to win, but they did win that game by 18 points. And again, Washington might not be what we thought. Like, the schedule has broken in the right way, where Ohio State has been allowed that opportunity to build. And because they don't have a loss right now, that can keep going. I think there would be a lot more urgency. I think there would be a lot more, not worry or nerves, but there would be a lot more angst if this team had one loss. Because then you're thinking, man, if we slip up against somebody we shouldn't, against Penn State, against Rutgers, against whoever, what if we go into that Michigan game with 2 losses, right? And especially if you begin the year thinking like that. Like, we can't go into Michigan with 2 losses, considering everything that game means and would mean if they have 2 losses. So Ohio State has been building towards this. It has been very impressive to see them just kind of put building block on building block on building block. And now you're going into November, and the Death Star might be fully operational.
Formula. Remember last year when Ryan Day kept talking a lot about leaving no doubt? And, I mean, they did in the playoff, right, the way they emphatically beat everybody. But I think I remember asking Ryan Day about this before we went down to Atlanta for the national championship about, this is about individual games, but can this be about the macro conversation too? And he was like, absolutely. I think winning a national championship, there's just things that you can almost let slide when a guy has a ring on his finger, because you're like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. He knows how to build something that can win a national title. And I think what's happened this year is, last year when they played like this, it made sense they were old. And so it's like, okay, you got to get a bunch of these old geezers to the national championship, right? They're young, they're spry, they got an awesome quarterback and awesome receivers. So like, let it rip, burn everything to the ground. And it's like, no, we're going to do what we did last year that won us a national championship. And you're right, it was frustrating to watch. It was really annoying to watch this team run pistol stretch to the boundary and either get 2 yards or 20. It's very frustrating, but it's necessary because it's the championship formula. It's how, what's the Adam Sandler thing? This is how I win. This is how he does it. This isn't about today. Yes, we do what's necessary to win the game, but we have to do what's necessary every single week to win a national championship. He called it a bunch of little sprints. I'm going to use a different term for it. I think it's a bunch of themes. Like, what's the theme of the week? The theme of Texas was win the game and, as Julian said, and not have to do what Texas had to do with Arch Manning. Check. What's the theme with Grambling and Sayin? Julian, set fire to the FCS. Check. What was the theme against Ohio? Let's find some balance and let's tinker. Let's figure out how many good players we have, how many different packages we can use. Check. What was the theme of the first Washington game? Win the game, really only ask Julian to do stuff when it's necessary on our terms and don't make mistakes. Check. Bye week, what was the theme against Minnesota? Hey, Julian, set fire again. Check. What was the theme against Illinois? Another game where it was like balance, play good defense, let's run the ball and figure this run game out. Check, outside of maybe taking the foot off the pedal a little too early. The theme of the Wisconsin game was everybody set fire. Everybody, defense, offense, special teams, everybody just burned the thing down. They had some good, they had some bad in the game, but I think if you had a goal for all 7 games, I think they have accomplished the goals for all 7 games. Even if from the outside looking in, it was probably a little frustrating to watch. But that's the formula. The first, you're not going to win a national championship, or you're not going to win a Heisman Trophy in September and October. You win Heisman trophies in November. You win national championships in late November, December, January. Okay, November is here now. They are officially done playing football in the preseason, in the middle of the season. When they get back, the contenders will start to separate from the pretenders. Some of those have already started today as you're watching this video version of the podcast. When they get back on November 1st, that probably should have been the next checkpoint of, okay, contender time. Unfortunately, Penn State stinks and they fired their head coach, so the opponent is not as challenging as it was supposed to be. But it doesn't change the formula. It doesn't change the mindset of how they're approaching that. And if I started to look at it from that perspective in the middle of the game of like, they're on schedule for what they're supposed to be doing according to the coaching staff and what the plan is and what the formula is. This is Ryan Day's championship formula. Build it in September. Build it in October. Start unleashing it in November, and by the time you get to December, your team is peaking at the right time, and what do you get? Tennessee got its butt whipped. Oregon got its butt whipped. Texas was a little weird, but then Jack Sawyer became a legend. Notre Dame got its butt whipped, and that is the plan here. So if you think about it from that, the process, the formula of it, right? The experimenting of it, all of it, all the words. I think we're all kind of saying the same thing, but the problem is we didn't look at it that way coming into the season because we didn't think that the defense was going to be this awesome where the formula was going to work the way it's worked. But Patricia being so good has allowed Brian Hartline to figure it out. Julian Sayin to figure it out week in and week out, and as a result, 7-0, 4-0. Andrew, what's the next 2 weeks need to be like for Ohio State? When they take the field against Penn State, what's the most important thing they do? How much time do we have left?
I don't know. Let's see.
Because, I don't know, man.
We
got 2 minutes. 30-second drill. What do you want to see next 2 weeks? Them figure out.
I want to see them figure out the right side of the offensive line. I wrote about this in our postgame story. I think they've got a problem at right guard with Tegra Shabola. I thought Josh Padilla, for the snaps that he did play, he came in sparingly. I thought he looked pretty good, so I thought Padilla can come in and play that role. I don't think Phillip Daniels had his best day either. I think there were spots where the offensive line looked really good, and there were spots that they were not so great. And you know what? We have a word for that in the business, and it's called inconsistency. I'd like to see them get more consistent on that offensive line, because we could talk about how bad Penn State is. Deny Dennis Sutton's good, and he could cause you problems in spots. If we're going to talk about them like a Minnesota, like an Iowa, like one of those teams like that, I know I'm over 30 seconds, there are teams. Penn State might be like the most talented 3-4, 4-3 team to ever play Ohio State.
That's an interesting conversation. What do you want to see? What do they need to do? What's the next 2 weeks need to be like?
Let's see. I got 30 seconds. Yeah. Good. It's not so much a problem as it is. I'm just kind of curious to see what they do with it because I talked about it leading into this Wisconsin game too. Lorenzo Styles is available now for this team, right? He could have played against Wisconsin had that warranted it. Regardless, Jermaine Matthews just keeps making plays, and I thought Devin Sanchez played really well against Wisconsin. That said, Illinois has more at receiver to attack Devin Sanchez with than Wisconsin does with anything in its passing attack. But I thought Devin Sanchez looked pretty good, and Jermaine just continues to make plays. And when he has to move over to that slot role, to the nickel role, I don't know, man. I'm curious to see against Penn State and Michigan down the road. Purdue's got a better passing attack this year. UCLA's got Nico, so they maybe try to pass around a bit. Like, the teams are going to try to attack Devin a bit more and try to maybe see what he's made out of. But I still think Jermaine can make some plays for you there at the nickel role. And my watch is buzzing right now, so I'm out of time. But Jermaine at nickel, not necessarily a problem, but like something I kind of want to see. I got to turn this off.
I mean, well, listen, we'll get better. It's a proven week for us as well. Special teams has got to stop being a problem. Running back is interesting because I feel like a hierarchy is forming, but every time we think that, something changes. Yeah. So I want to see what is Carlos Lachlan thinking about that. Most importantly, though, I little slippage the last 2 weeks in the second half when games are put away from the offense and the defense a little bit. You can't get bored. The formula matters, but you can't get bored with the formula. You can't get bored. I don't think they're reading their press clippings. I just think it's a long season, and it's easy to kind of let your foot off a little bit. So I just want to see this is a good time to have a bye week. Get some rest. You're not on the edge for a little bit. You can relax. The coaches are going to go on the road for recruiting for a week, and then you can lock back in for the second half of the season. I think, again, it's another thing that's been perfectly timed to not do that during the first week. You do that during the second bye week because it's literally the halfway point for a team that might play 16 games this year. They need this. They earned the bye week. They're 7-0. They've earned this bye week. But kind of lock back in and don't – like the second half slippage is not going to be a problem because of who they're playing next, but you just don't want to see it because it's not about your opponent. It's about them. 614.
I just want to say one thing. It felt like for Ohio State's sideline and for everyone in the stadium, the third quarter was like just get to jump around.
Yeah. And that's great for everybody in the stadium, but the Ohio State sideline can't think like that. 614-350-3315. It's a 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. And go listen to Buckeye Talk, wherever you find podcasts, some fun pods coming up in the next couple of weeks because November has arrived for Ohio State. They're done playing football until November hits. I'm Steven, that's Stefan, that's Andrew. Ohio State 34-0 over Wisconsin as a number one team in the country. Talk to you guys later.